Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. We're on GT Sport and we're going through the highlights of the Fuji Group 3 race in the FIA Manufacturers Series that was on previously a few weeks back, I think it was. This was possibly the longest race we've ever had in FIA, just under 40 minutes. It's going to be an interesting one. You have to use the medium tyres in this race. The soft tyres are available, however, so most people will be opting for 2 stints on the soft tyre and then just a shorter run on them medium tyres. There was fuel saving required in this race, so you're going to see every now and then we might not over rev the car, but we were going with a pretty aggressive strategy anyway. I found that the McLaren not being that brilliant on fuel, it really wasn't worth saving fuel. This is what I find: if your car isn't particularly great on fuel, sometimes it's best just to push on, especially in Group 3 where the differences aren't massive. It's not like Group 4 where you have quite big differences with fuel management, for example. But in Group 3 the cars, there is differences, but they're not massive, so pushing can sometimes be the beneficial way, especially when we're trying to stay in that slipstream of the driver in front of us. V1 Creaser there in the Viper. The Viper, like I say, is the go-to car for this track. I think it was a car that most people used in the daily race. Very strong car around here, nice to drive, very good straight line speed as well. So you can see already we've pretty much broke the slipstream to P3, and you can see I'm going to the left because I'm trying to make it aware that to the Viper in front of me that I'm not going to go for a move, because at this stage of the race what I want to do, and this is what I tend to do all the time, is there is no point fighting for that lead in this race. I know that that Viper is faster than me on the straight. I know it's a faster car over the lap really here. So the best thing I can do really is to sit behind, save some fuel if I can, whenever I can on the main straight, and try and break the slipstream to the group that are chasing behind, because if we can do that, we can pull away and then we can have a nice clean race and we don't have any fighting, no penalties. And that is what I tend to do. I like to just let that gap develop between myself and the cars behind and not battle with the leader in this situation, because there's not much point in my view. I feel like if we battle, we just slow everyone down and then we bring other cars up from behind, and then you end up with a situation where you risk losing multiple places. So again, you'll see on the replay camera, you can see a bit of a gap developing. We've got that slipstream to the Viper into the braking zone, making sure we're braking nice and early. We don't want to over brake the car. We're trying to look after them rear tyres. The McLaren, obviously not the greatest car when it comes to tyre wear on the rear tyres. So during the downshifting phase, we're going to be slightly looking after the tyres by shifting a little bit slower than what you'd normally do. And this is obviously, as also, we don't want to overdrive the car, because we don't want to give that Vantage the chance to get in the slipstream, because it will take advantage of a situation on the straight where the extra power will breeze past the McLaren. So you can see at the moment, again, we had an opportunity to go for a move there on the Viper, but I decided not to do it. I'm trying to make sure he's aware that I'm not going to do it. You can see me pulling over to the left hand side because I'm not going to dive up the inside. I'm trying to make him away. You can see again, staying to the left. I'm trying to drive it sensibly, trying to drive it smart, stay in the slipstream. I know that that Viper in front of me is going to be very fast in this race condition, and the aim here, as you can see that Vantage behind us creeping into the slipstream every now and then, is to just keep him out of that draft range, because I know for a fact that if that Aston gets in the slipstream, he's going to come right up behind us, because the acceleration on that car is probably maybe even faster than the Viper in front of me on the early stages. Top end though, the Viper is pretty much untouchable, I believe. So onto the power nice and early. We get a good exit there. That's going to give us the slipstream down. So you can see nearly lost the slipstream to P1. However, we managed to really get on the power nice and early, and we've got that slipstream down the straight now, and we're gaining. And again, we have to make sure that we hit the braking point at the end of the straight so we don't overshoot and lose that slipstream. It's so important to drive it sensibly in these situations. So you can see early on the brakes, again, being gentle on the downshifting, not overly aggressive, down to first gear here, and again, being very cautious on the throttle. You see that 50 to 70% throttle inputs. That again is to help save the rear tyres, because of McLaren, again, one of the not so great cars on tyre wear. However, I am starting to get used to driving it and to how to look after the tyre wears. A lot of it is on downshifting with this car, very similar to the Audi R8 and stuff. If you're just a bit more gentle on the downshifting, holding the gears a little bit higher and not downshifting aggressively, it will really help out on your rear tyre wear. So yeah, bear that in mind if you're in an MR car like the Lamborghini, the Audi, the McLaren, the Ferrari. Slow downshift will really hold your rear tyre wear, into a better condition. Also, try not to shift down too many times. So if your car can do it in a higher gear, try and do it in that higher gear. But obviously with the McLaren, first gear is very long, so I had to go into that first gear quite a few times in the McLaren, and I obviously wanted to try and keep pace with this Viper in front of us. You can see at this point we've lost the slipstream to P2, so this is pretty much the perfect scenario for me right now. We've got rid of that slipstream. We're able to sit in the slipstream of Creaser in front of us in that Viper and just pull away. So you can see what I'm trying to do here is, again, widen that line in. We don't want to take too tight a line so that we're getting on the power, wearing them rear tyres out. And what this is going to do is, although we gained a bit on the entry into the corner, we get a really good slipstream down the straight, and this is then going to enable me to do a little bit of short shifting. You see, every now and then I'm going to shift a little bit early like there. We don't over rev the car. The McLaren will do 162, I think, in 5th gear, but we're just shifting into 6th nice and early, using some fuel saving there while we got that slipstream. We don't want to be going too close to the rear of the car in front in the braking zone. We want to keep it nice and smooth. So driving this race very, very well at the moment as we skip ahead to the end of lap 7. Now, this was the earliest you could pit. Now, I thought my tyres were in pretty okay condition. You can see our lap times actually doing a brilliant job so far. All 1 minute 37s with the full fuel. At this stage of the race, that is pretty solid driving. So I'm thinking here, I'm going to just extend, because I was a little bit worried where he would come out with the cars behind. However, the car behind, I think, also went in the pits. Now, that kind of affected where he was going to come out. You see that we've got P2 though, who hasn't pitted, and I was just not sure where P4, 5, etc. would come out, but it looks like Creaser has come out in clean air, so possibly I should have followed him in there. But I thought, while the tyres are in good condition, if I can eke out 8 laps on these and then another 8 laps on the next set of softs, it'll put me in good stead for a good result at the end of the race. So we haven't got slipstream. We're trying to push on this lap, obviously, because we've got to make sure we get a nice solid lap in. But the tyres are fading. You can see on the telemetry our rear tyres are starting to fade quite badly now. I can feel it on the power. The car doesn't have the grip that was there before, but we're going to try and keep it smooth so that we don't lose too much time. You can see that P2 behind us there, gaining a little bit on this lap. This is the lap where you are going to lose out with the McLaren, as it does tend to suffer, obviously, with that, you know, the 8 lap stint. That is when it's going to lose a bit of time, but we're keeping it quite smooth, to be honest, driving pretty solid. We're possibly going to lose out to Creaser though. If he's not had any real traffic to overtake, we're going to possibly lose out on that slipstream, and this was the only mistake. I think this could be a mistake in the race. If we would have pitted behind him, we would have came out right behind him in that slipstream again, but who knows, you know, you don't know that's going to be the situation. I played a risk really in doing this, hoping that he'd go into traffic, because I don't think there was any other way that we were going to be able to beat that Viper, because his straight line speed was too much, and the car was just very, very quick in general. Good at fuel saving as well, I think, here. So into the pits, another set of soft tyres on. We're not going to refuel. We don't need any fuel on the car, because we want to keep that tank nice and light to help preserve these tyres for as long as possible. So as we come out of the pits, you can see there, you can see the undercut. Then fresh set of soft tyres have really helped Creaser there. He's got that gap over 2 seconds. So we have actually lost out about 1 second, 1.5 seconds there by not pitting. So unfortunately, I think we possibly should have pitted and stayed in that slipstream, and obviously carried on being able to save fuel. But from now this point onwards, we're going to have to do this all ourselves with no slipstream and just some pretty solid driving. You can see skipping a little bit further ahead in the race, and you can see we've actually gained half a second. Now, I do think that Creaser was saving fuel during that phase in the Viper, trying to do a bit of fuel saving to ensure that he's not going to get overtook in the pits. Myself, I wasn't really too worried about the fuel saving. You can see doing 1 minute 36.7, 1 minute 36.8. This is with no slipstream as well. This was just on pace by pushing, and we're driving pretty nice at this stage of the race. Not overdriving it either, we're just being really smooth, and the tyre wear is looking okay. I think the extra pace that we've done is taking the life out of the tyres a little bit, because obviously during that first stint we were able to do some tyre management with the slipstream. It's always an advantage when you've got the slipstream to the car in front. You can brake that little bit earlier. You can get on the throttle nice and smoothly, because you know that you've got the slipstream to help drag you back up to the car in front. So having to push a little bit more aggressively this time, but you can see the gap between myself and P3 really developing into a solid gap there. So it looks like at this stage of the race we seem to have P2 covered. We're driving very well. I'm driving pretty solid. Fuel's going down now. You can see where the lighter the car's getting with that rear tyre where we've obviously been pushing. It is starting to get a little bit loose on that rear end. You know, it's starting to slide out on the corners on the power, but we're trying our hardest to stay with P1. We're trying to push him. If he makes a mistake, we want to be there to take advantage in this race. But Creaser in that in the Viper is driving very smooth and very consistent as we start lap 14. So this is coming into the phase of the pit stop phase for the third stint now, the end of the second stint. obviously Creaser pitted on lap 7, so I think with this lap that he's doing now, or lap 15, he might decide to pit and go, or at the end of lap 15 he might decide to go for a pit stop. I can obviously go to lap 16 on the softer tyre. It'll be interesting what lap P1 decides to go in the pits. Obviously he's been doing fuel saving. I think he was saving more fuel than what I was during this phase, because obviously the Viper can short shift a little bit more down the straights and through some of the acceleration zones compared to McLaren, that you do kind of need to rev it out a bit more. But the gap still to P3 pretty solid. We drove quite well. You can see lap 13, pretty good lap still, 37.1 with these tyres starting to fade. You can see that rear tyre wear where that fuel's getting lighter and we're getting on the fuel, you know, the power nice and early, and the rear's starting to step out a little bit because it's not got the weight on the car. It is starting to take some of that life out the rears, and I was actually pushing quite aggressively at this stage, because I thought if we can get in the slipstream and maybe put some pressure on him, it'd be brilliant, because then I can maybe do a bit of fuel saving for a lap or so, or even come out behind him in the pit stop phase. But you know, at this stage you don't know what fuel saving P1's doing, but I did have an inkling that he might actually have saved a little bit more fuel than what I had in this race. As we come out the final corner, trying to get on the power smoothly again, you can see that rear nearly stepping out. We just about managed to keep it on the track and work our way down the main straight and over the line to start lap 15. So it's going to be interesting where Creaser, what lap he pits on. Will he pit at the end of lap 15, or will he go a little bit further on this stint and maybe do 9 laps on these tyres? That would definitely be quite a lot of laps to do for the Viper. So at the moment, although he gained a little bit on with the undercut, we've brought it back a little bit, but this means we've had to use a bit more fuel to bring that gap back. He's obviously been able to save fuel and probably keep the gap out of the slipstream. I'm pretty sure that if he wanted to, he could have pulled away a little bit more during this phase. But now we're coming up to the pit stop phase for ourselves and also Creaser. We're gonna, I pretty much guaranteed myself I was gonna go to lap 16, because we'd done 8 laps on the first stint and it was pretty okay for the way it was driving. So I thought to myself, we're gonna go 8 laps on the second stint and reduce that time on the medium tyre. Now there was a strategy you could go with, doing the 3 stints on the soft tyres and just 1 lap on the medium. However, with the pit lane loss here, and the advantage wasn't massive really, so most people were deciding to go down the route of doing the 8-8 and then 7 laps onto the medium tyre at the end, and that is the strategy that I was pretty much stuck with and that I was sticking with, because the other strategy just didn't really work with traffic and stuff like that. So you can see, trying to keep it on the track here, you can see the tyres are definitely starting to fade, and you can see that Creaser is pushing a little bit more on this lap. So I was thinking maybe he is going to go in the pits on lap 15. It would make sense because he's obviously on his 8th lap on them tyres. Doing 9 laps on the tyres, they will start to fade a little bit. So yeah, Creaser off into the pits, and you're going to see that his fuel is a little bit better than mine. You can see that he's got a bit more fuel, so he's been able to obviously save a little bit more fuel than what I could during that phase, as we skip ahead to the end of lap 16, where we're going to now go in the pits. So let's see what undercut he'll get. Remember, he's got to go on the medium tyres this time though, so it'll be interesting how much he'll gain. However, he did have to put less fuel in, so I did expect him to get a couple of seconds, 3 seconds, etc. of an undercut, because if he has to put a lap or so less fuel than me, that's going to be a 1.5 seconds just on its own in the pits, and then he's got the undercut on fresh mediums, which still will be a bit faster than the worn soft tyre. So as we come out of the pits again, you can see he's managed to pull that undercut off, and I also think he's got enough fuel to push a little bit more aggressively now towards the end. I put enough fuel to make sure that I could drive it pretty aggressive as well. I didn't want to be in a situation where I had to save fuel, and you can see at the moment we're in a pretty good position. I think that P3 behind us did his medium stint on the middle, after he pitted, and he's now on the soft tyre. So he's on the soft tyres behind us. He's going to be able to gain some time for the remaining laps. However, I was pretty confident that he wouldn't be able to get that 10-second gap, especially towards the end of the race when the medium tyres start equaling out to the softer tyres. So yeah, he's not really going to be an issue in this race, I don't think, as we try and push on now and see if we can do anything about P1 in that Viper. However, there wasn't really much we could do, if I'm brutally honest. It was just a case of keeping it smooth, keeping it on the track, making sure we don't make any mistakes, and trying to bring it home for a pretty solid P2 in this race. So you can see now that we did actually lose out about, I think, a few extra seconds with that undercut on the fuel. So we're down to just under 4 seconds behind him, trying to stay with him. But I think at this phase now, like I said, with both of us able to push towards the end, He's got an extra lap done on them tyres, however I don't think that's really going to come into play. The tyre wear was quite low, we're on the medium tyre, so it might have a little bit of an influence on the final lap. But yeah, all I can do now is try and keep it smooth, stay on the track and pick up a P2 in this race. So we're going to go over the line, and you can see that gap is a little bit too much to close in. You can see P3 is gaining on us, but not really gaining fast enough for us to worry about. So yeah, we're going to skip through to the final lap now. Everything was going pretty well. We drove it nice and smooth on these mediums. We were doing 1 minute 37, starting to creep into the 38s now, but overall keeping it nice and smooth. You can see the tyre wear kicking in. You can see that gap to P3 has come down, but it's not come down. Like I said, I was pretty confident he wouldn't be able to gain enough to really challenge us. And you can see I think he's actually starting to fade a bit on them softer tyres now as we go through to the final sectors of this race. Drove pretty much solid. This was one of our strongest drives, to be honest. I wish I would have done this drive in one of the earlier races when we actually qualified higher up. I think we qualified in P4 or 5 or something like that in one of the high lobbies. I think it was the first or second lobby of the day, but we had penalties, issues, unlucky penalties, and we ended up not getting the result that we wanted. So yeah, there was an opportunity. We had the pace to get big points in this. However, we carried on through the day and we managed to pick up a P2, so pretty happy with that. As we power out the final corner, you can see fuel's fine, tyres are fine, and you can see the car behind is nowhere near close enough. I think that he had done that strategy because he was in the Ferrari. He was probably able to save a lot of fuel as well in that Ferrari, but then chose the strategy that he went on because of the tyre wear with the Ferrari. So yeah, P2, some okay points. I think we came away from this race with around 320 points. We'll take a look in a minute. You can see the finishing time was actually really fast. I think Crease's finishing time was almost identical to the finishing time in slot 1 of the day. So to be 5 seconds behind that, I think a 27.52 finishing pace, considering we didn't really have slipstream. So we had slipstream for 7 laps and that was it. The rest of the laps were driven on pace and couldn't really do any sort of saving of fuel. I think we did quite a good finishing pace there. So really happy with that drive. We come away with 320 points, as you can see there, which is pretty solid. It could have been better if we would have picked up the result earlier in the day. However, still important to get them 300 plus points in with 5 rounds counting. So happy with that. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. Hit that notification button. Also, hit the thumbs up button if you did enjoy this video. Thanks again for watching, everyone.